sharing some trades I made this week in Dynasty Leagues, talking a little Thursday Night Football, and we'll see what else comes up here on this edition of the RotoViz Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Colm Kelly, delighted to bring you the show as always. It's a chilly morning here in Ireland as I sit down to record this one. I just did the school bus run. I still, for people watching this on the video side, have on a jacket to get myself back up to house temperature, I guess we'll say, to room temperature after the chill in the air. My hands are pretty cold here as we sit here, but it is approaching Halloween. Leaves are falling off the trees. Hopefully, wherever you are, you're having a good week so far. I just finished up prior to that bus run watching Thursday Night Football. The advantage of, we're not watching it live is you can get that game in 4D and you can blast through it pretty sharpish to see every single play, cut out all the advertisements and so on. So got that done, and then we're getting ready to do a quick trip, hopefully, to the doctor's office for my son having an appointment this morning. So fitting this in the meantime, I have got a lot of feedback back from people enjoying hearing these little stories of what is happening in between the journeys that we're doing here to get these shows out. Thursday Night Football was absolutely, I thought, pretty spectacular, pretty fun for what I was expecting going in versus what happened coming out. We'll kick off with that because I think we'll get through it pretty quickly. And then I want to talk about some trades that I did this week. I traded away Cam Skattebo in a league, so we're going to talk about that in a moment. You can see if you agree, disagree. Did my logic make sense? Because I was really battling this one. I was really on the fence as to whether or not to make the trade happen. But on Thursday Night Football, we have to go through some of the performances. And there's going to be some of it that people, I've mentioned in the last couple of shows, trying to decide those Thursday Night Football start-sit decisions. Can you play them? Will you play them? What's the overall call? And on this particular week, you have Jamar Chase where you have to play him. There's no alternative option. If you have a DK Metcalf with some of the buys that are on, maybe you have to play him. Unfortunately, Metcalf had a couple of really nice plays in this one. But, the long, a 39-yard reception along the sideline, just the 5 targets again for him, 3 for 50, doesn't get in the end zone. So you finish with 8 points in PPR leagues. It isn't really going to get it done for you. When we look through the overall box scores, the part that's going to stand out for people is obviously Aaron Rodgers had 4 touchdowns, but we're going to look at where those touchdowns went. You get tight ends all over the place. You get Johnny Smith with a touchdown, kind of on an extended Rodgers play, kind of the old school Adla maiden play that you would have seen from his time in Green Bay. Scrambles across, gets some good blocking, finds Johnny Smith in the end zone for that 10-yard touchdown. He finishes 3 for 28 and a touchdown on 6 targets. So again, it's if you had to add him into your lineup this week, it's going to help you, but it's also something that long term is hard to continue to see scores if you don't get those touchdowns. The same would be going for a Darnell Washington. I would imagine nobody was in a situation to have to start him this week, but he goes 3 receptions for 2 yards and a touchdown. But the standout one is going to be Pat Freiermuth, who is kind of a long-term favorite, I guess we'll say. It's been a tough season, and last season, he starts off pretty good as a rookie. You're hoping that he takes that trajectory to move forward, and it hasn't happened for him. This one, he gets 6 targets. He gets 5 receptions for 111 and 2. Now, one of those is a 68-yard reception on another kind of scrambled, extended play. The safety gets caught out a little bit in the position at the back end, and then it's fitted into a window just in front of him, and then Freiermuth is off to the races for that long touchdown on a kind of slightly broken play, I guess we could call it. It's interesting to see some of the teams, in best ball leagues that I have a couple of rosters that have Pat Freiermuth, who is still sticking on to them. Drafts where you're deciding between, Freiermuth late and some other options, but the 30.6 points in tight end premium looks pretty wild in some of those best ball teams. It may help a little bit of a surge or a movement off where those teams are sitting after this week. And then Jaylen Warren, and this is where we're getting into how did it look? I thought Jaylen Warren looked good in this one. He has 4 for 31 on 5 targets, but he also 16 for 127 on the ground. But then when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, you're getting 127, but you're at 12.7 points for the rushing element, and then 7.1 added on to that. So it's a good solid score. But for how much work he did in this and how he looked, it was unfortunate. Now, the one big bonus for Jaylen Warren managers is he had 16 carries to Kenneth Gainwell's 3. So there was obviously a a lot more work going for Warren post that game that happened here in Ireland, where it was feeling a little bit tricky as to how that would balance out. And I think it's a little bit different, obviously, in Carolina. But, Carolina, we've had 2 huge Rico Dowdle games. We're wondering what will happen with Chuba Hubbard. Me and Sean talked this week about it being a 50-50 split kind of range moving forward. But obviously, we kind of felt that Gainwell had pushed himself into play there. And also, I felt that Gainwell had worked himself really into that receiving role, where he has the two targets in this for 2 receptions versus Jaylen Warren's 5 targets with 4 receptions going his way. I thought Warren, that is, looked good in this game. And then I do have to highlight with Rodgers. Some of Rodgers' passes in this game had the zip and velocity of what we would have seen in some of his time in Green Bay. I don't think some of the decision making might be as good as it once was. Some of the athleticism isn't. But he has a Hail Mary throw at the end of this one to try and get the win. Traveled almost 70 yards in the air, 69.8. It was the longest pass attempt recorded since 2017. So the arm strength still there, but obviously resulted in an incompletion, but gets it all the way down there to the end zone to give the players a chance to make that play. So I was extremely impressed with Rodgers' arm here, but the tricky part again is going to be the offense. Who can you trust on a weekly basis? And that's the big question now with the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward. But Rodgers, somebody who Sean, I talk about these $1 pickups sometimes that Sean makes in leagues, and in the FFPC Main Event, he added Aaron Rodgers in our team this week for $1. But you're looking then at how that plays out over the course of the season. But he has started to rack up fantasy points over the last couple of games. So 27 points for him in this one. Certainly something to watch going forward. They do get the Packers next week. Maybe it's a Aaron Rodgers revenge game. I'm hoping that the Packers come out on top of that one, but we'll see how that plays out ahead of time. The one note then on the Steelers is they are in a situation where they're 6 points down, 5 minutes to go. It's 4th and 4 at their own 45. They punt it back. That was one where I think you should be going for it to try and get the win. If you get the first down there, your chances of winning, obviously you go and get the touchdown. Your percentage of winning would have been 39% if you succeed, 12% if you fail. Punting it really, if the Bengals, it's one of those ones where there's a strong chance you don't get the ball back, but punting it reduced the chances of winning down to 19%. So there's a slightly better chance of winning with a punt versus a failed attempt, but certainly one that I think they should have went on there. They do get the ball back, as I mentioned. There's a couple of changes in possession after that, so I didn't think it was as egregious then with how the game played out, but I did feel at the time watching that game that they should have gone ahead and went for it there. Now, that's the Steelers. Let's talk about the kind of, can we say, reinvigorated Cincinnati Bengals. They get Joe Burrow. They go up against the Steelers here, and that leads to, I think, an offense that pieces are now becoming usable as we move forward here. They are 3-4 on the season. We have a long way to go before we get a Joe Burrow back, but I talked maybe it was last week, I talked about, so it might have been the Jets or the Dolphins. I think it was the Dolphins, where, is there a point where players start to get sat down, when we get to week 13, 14, we don't want to, teams mightn't want to activate some of those injury guarantees and things like that. And you'd be worried about that a little bit here with the Bengals as they move forward. But now they get the Jets, the Bears, back to the Steelers. They get the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills. Now, obviously, the Ravens, they get them actually twice in that Ravens, pretty tough run there, because we'll be expecting the Ravens hopefully to get some players back and they'll have Lamar back and be a much more competitive game. But then they get the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Browns, and that's their run through the rest of the season. But when we look at that, the Jets next week, wheels up for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, certainly in that one. But Joe Flacco showing that willingness to make attempts. At this point in Joe Flacco's career, there's not much point in him playing it conservatively. He's on the last run here. He's on people say the back nine. I think he's on the 18th green at this point. But he's 13 of 47 for 342, 3 touchdowns. But what I will say in this one is it goes wild. 23, that is 2-3 targets to Jamar Chase, 16 receptions, 161 and a touchdown. So big night for him. You'll be disappointed if you're T. Higgins manager, to end up with less than half the targets, 10 targets, 6 receptions for 96 and 1. T. Higgins, in fairness, could have I think he probably gets in the end zone with that last one where they go for the field goal. I mentioned the Hail Mary attempt by Aaron Rodgers, but it's one where T. Higgins catches the ball. There's 2 minutes left. Maybe he slides down inside the 5. He probably can get in. There's one defender to beat. And I think with Higgins's, physicality, he can get in there. And that would have made it, it would still be a 6, but it would be 6 for 102, which would be a big, big night there. Yoshivas had a couple of nice catches, 3 for 49. Noah Fant, 4 for 44 and a touchdown on 4 targets. Chase Brown, 2 for -8. So not a lot in the air for Chase Brown, but Chase Brown looked a lot better running the ball. It was 11 for 108, and then P. Ryan had 7 for 33. So not a big split there. It was more usable for Chase Brown, but like I talked with Jalen Warren, when you're not getting in the end zone and you're not picking up a lot of receptions, that gets pretty tough. But when you have Jamar Chase, they were just giving him every sort of pass attempt. He was open every single time. There's a funny clip in this. He actually has a drop where Joe Flacco's face is absolute astonishment as he looks at him like, I didn't know that could happen. So Joe Flacco learning all the time, even at this point of his career. But, a massive game for Jamar Chase. And if you had T. Higgins in your lineup, a big performance from him as well. We're going to talk about Higgins and Brown in a moment because I had concerns about this offense over the last couple of weeks, and I made some moves in those trades that we're going to talk about involving names like that. So a big performance here from the Bengals. The other thing I like to see, the targets went to Chase, Higgins, Yoshivas, Fant, and Brown. That was all the targets. There's 45 targets. Now there's 33 of them that went to Higgins and Chase, and that's what you want to see moving forward. Give it to your star wide receivers. Let them make plays. Talked with Sean about this, about the touchdown that Chase had against the Packers. He's being held. He has a one-handed reception at the goal line for a touchdown. Joe Flacco was giving his guy the chance to make the play, and that's what we want to see. So Jamar Chase back into that conversation as the wide receiver 1 rest of season, obviously, with the last couple of performances. And then T. Higgins is certainly coming back into that usable category as we move forward here. But it's always a kind of little bit of a frustrating experience with T. Higgins in terms of having him on your roster. And I guess that's a chance to move in to the trades themselves at this particular point. So I mentioned Chase Brown. This one a week ago, Saturday, the 11th of October, this one happened. So prior to last week's action, made a deal where I gave up Chase Brown, received a 2026 second round pick. And a second round pick, when we look at it, may not return the value that I'm kind of looking for moving forward. But when we look at what we are now, this team that I'm going to talk about actually won the league last year and is now 1-5. And interestingly, myself and Sean won the FFPC Listener League last year. And then we are now 1-5, I believe, in that one as well. So it shows kind of where some of these teams were, strength-wise, particularly down the stretch, and pushing them to a championship last season versus some of the injuries, issues, underperformances, and so on this season. The likes of a Higgins, who in a couple of weeks recently haven't been confident to go and start. This roster, for example, has a Mark Andrews on it that I've been trying to move for quite some time. But I have moved now Chase Brown, who had a very strong run last year. It is a Josh Allen team with Jared Goff. So obviously that provided a lot of firepower. It had T. Higgins, it had Jordan Addison. They were all in the mix. Now, when we talk through this, they no longer have T. Higgins, Jordan Addison, Chase Brown on this roster. But one of those teams that was very strong last year coming into the season with Zay Flowers and co that I've just gone through there. Pretty confident that we would get a challenge again, but it just hasn't worked out. So then you're looking ahead to this decision of, what are we doing? This team is not competing this year, that is for sure. There's no backdoor to get the 101. It's a team where it's going to get its pick based on, overall standing at the end of the season. So when I looked through what we could do then, and these are parts that, I think it's important to factor in. Chase Brown, now 25 years old, and everyone knows that if you're 25 now, in a year's time, you're going to be 26. But you start to look at closing windows of opportunities to sell, where a team now may be looking at a buy low in Chase Brown, which this could turn out to be, to head and try and win a championship. But when we look at the scores over the course of this season, he has scored double-digit points now 4 times, including Thursday Night Football, but no game apart from week 1, which was his highest score, was 13.1. So he got a touchdown in week 1. He has not gone over 13.1 all season. The scores have been between 6 and obviously 13.1, but there's a 10-point game, an 11-point game, a 12-point game. And if we look at the points or the yardage, for example, Thursday Night Football, the 108 rushing yards is the high mark of the season. 42 before that, 27, 43 at the Vikings, 47, 43 in week 1. His carries also 23 in week 1, but then 16 week 2, then 10, 10, 8, 9, 11 this week. And we look at receptions, 2, 2, 4, 3, 7 in week 5 versus the Lions, but then 2 and 2 again. So the numbers just aren't there at the moment. Then the offensive concerns, that may be eased a little bit now, but at the same time, that was building up. So you're looking at a running back who may be going into a window where the value goes down. And then you're also thinking, do you keep Chase Brown through the rest of the season on a roster that you're not going to compete with? The injury potential, does he get hurt? I have a couple of rosters that are carrying at the moment James Conner and players like that can't then until next season and he's healthy, no selling opportunity. So there's some of the things I'm looking into. And then so that one for me made sense. Now, second round pick, what do I like if it was in before week 1? Would I like the first round pick? Certainly. But the trajectory put that at a fair price for me. But I'm always interested in what other people think. Maybe you're thinking, a second rounder, if that was my league, I'd love to get Chase Brown on the roster now to try and go for a championship run. But if you're thinking this team can't compete this year and you're looking to next year, does that make more sense? I think on that one it does. Now, one of these offers that I sent out this week, one was on Tuesday and it was accepted. The other one I accepted on Wednesday. The second one was T. Higgins, who I mentioned a moment ago, being, it's 2 Bengals players and been concerned around the offense and all of those things. This one was with the Joe Flacco move. And then you're thinking Joe Flacco and how that worked out against the Packers was pretty fine. But overall, when we look at the trajectory, there was 5 receptions last week, which was a season high. There was 62 yards last week. You're thinking, again, season high. We might be going in the right direction. The targets was a joint season high. Then we get into this one. We get 21.6 points, which again, if you're the person who made this trade with me, awesome to slot that into your lineup if you play it on Thursday Night Football. But the other parts of it then again, going to be 27, still in the peak area of career. The one thing with Higgins that I would like to hold on to is potential to become the clear focal point in wide receiver 1 of another offense. But then you're looking at, like, if he stays here with the Bengals, well, you're in the situation we're in now. We know what we're getting. But if you also move to another roster, which roster is it a team that has loads of cap room that is, a bad team? Are you going to just be a guy on a bad team, or are you going to be then a Jamar Chase on a bad team, but your name's T. Higgins? And I would always be excited to see Higgins given that opportunity, as a 27-year-old next season or season after as the wide receiver 1 on a roster. But they now get the Jets and the Bears, as I mentioned, in the bye week. So they're set up pretty well here. I think this trade for the manager could work out very well for the second round pick. The other part of this one for me, I find it very tough over the years. I have a lot of T. Higgins shares, and this was part of kind of with these ones that's coming up with Skattebo as well. A little bit of diversification in terms of I have Higgins on a lot of rosters, and for people who have Higgins on rosters, they'll know, each year it can be a little bit frustrating if we see him, not involved or sitting out, or how it's all playing out. Like last season, if we go back and look, like he finishes week 17, which 40.1 points on the season, on the game, with 3 touchdowns, 11 for 131. But when we work our way down through then, like missed a number of games, missed 3 games in the middle of the season, missed 2 games to start the season, 6-point game, 12-point game, 29, 14, 18. That's really strong. But if we look at when he's active, very strong performances. Most of the games last year plus 17 points when active, and doing that with around 5-6 receptions, which is very, very efficient as well. But over the course of the years, it's just got a little bit frustrating. But I think there's an incredible talent there, a player that I love. But just again, trying to diversify across rosters. Maybe some of the teams that are competing, I've kept them on. This team not competing, maybe it's a chance to have a pick for next year's draft. I think this is a trade that can work out for us both. But I could see a case in the offseason where I'm like, if I wanted to get Higgins back on a roster, it's going to be at least a first round pick, maybe a first and a second, and I could see this not working out for me. This is the one I'm also considering. The other thing, I'm sure you have all had this in the past, you send out a trade and you're like, I'm going to send out a couple of trades to people who are in competitive positions to see if they want to add this player. T. Higgins being the example here. Send it out to like 5 teams. Send it out to 3 teams. Go to send it to the 4th. T. Higgins is no longer on this roster. And it's like, okay, somebody instantly accepted it. That obviously adds that feeling in your head of, maybe I made a mistake there. Maybe I should have asked for the first to see if I could get it. But I do think the second's a fair bit on it, and we'll see what happens now, moving forward. This is one where could work out to be a good move for me, but it could work out to be a terrible move as well. I'd be interested on your thoughts on it. And the last one, I think, is where this becomes a real peak of like, was it right? Was it wrong? What should have happened here? This one is one where I have got an absolute haul of picks. And in this league now, I have a monstrosity of options as we move forward here with the picks and the opportunities in next year's draft. Now, a lot can change between now and next year's draft, and that's one of the advantages of making these trades is you'll be able to move up potentially in the draft. Maybe you'll be able to trade for a veteran. Maybe some of these players now that are injured. I would have rather done some of these moves and instead of getting a first, get a second plus a player, but it just didn't work out with the teams that I was making these trades with. So this particular team now has 2 firsts, it has 4 seconds, 3 thirds, and a 4th, which at this point of the stage and with a pretty strong roster still remaining, like it's a team. I mentioned some of the players, like I do have James Conner on this roster, so he's obviously not going to be able to be moved, and that's kind of that injury element I mentioned, but we don't want Chase Brown to get injured, but a Chase Brown. It's also a roster that has players that people may not be excited about, but Jalen Coker will be coming off injured reserve, Christian Watson will be coming off injured reserve, and then obviously I would have to cut 2 players to make that happen, and this was an opportunity to move 2 players and receive picks and then have that free space for when those changes occur. But it's an RJ Harvey roster, for example. It's a Bashal Tutin roster. Lots of young players that I still think have a chance to really develop over the next couple of seasons, and maybe just this is a slight retinkering of the build of the roster overall heading into next season. So I mentioned it has the picks, but how did it get those picks? Well, some of these trades that I've mentioned, but it also moved Cam Skattebo and Jordan Addison. And this was one where the offers come in and I was like, yeah, I think I'll have a think about this, but I don't think I'm going to do it. And talking with the other manager, the offer continued to up. So I think it started with 2 firsts and a third. And then we got it to 2 firsts and a second. And then it was 2 firsts, a second, and a third. And then, like I've mentioned the picks for this coming draft, but one of these firsts and one of these seconds is for 2027. So giving you the options again for future seasons to add up on those other picks and potentially then even move them in this year's draft if you really wanted to do something, or maybe you want to get one of the star wide receivers and you're in a position where you can give up 2 firsts next year from this trade basically to try and make that happen. But Skattebo, obviously the monster Thursday night game, and I have him across most of my leagues, which is obviously a very big positive. But it also gets you into a position where how quickly things can change in the NFL, and again, physical style of play. What if he gets hurt? What if he gets injured? What all goes into occurrence there, and you have to factor all these things in. But again, going to be starting in a lot of leagues, diversifying a little bit. But it ends up being a first round in 2026, a first round in 2027, and then a second in 2026 and a second in 2027. And it felt at that point that it was going to be hard to, turn that down. And on this one, I was like, I don't want to trade either of these guys away. They're both young. They're both going to be going into next season. Skattebo could be the lead back for this team, getting just so much work. He'll be 24 entering next season. Then if we look at Jordan Addison and his profile, like Addison's just 23 years old now. He's going to be 24 entering next season. He does nothing but score or catch touchdowns in terms of like when he's playing. He's usually getting in the end zone. He has the explosiveness to put up the yard. He's playing across from Justin Jefferson. There's just a lot to be positive about with a third-year receiver of that talent. But then you think about what will J.J. McCarthy look like in this offense? How will it all work out? You're trying to picture it all. And again, Addison is a heavily rostered player of mine. But you're getting basically a first and a second for each guy. You can split that around whatever way you want. You could say you get 2 seconds for Addison and 2 firsts for Skattebo, whatever way it's going to make you feel comfortable with your decision-making process. But this was one where I was so on the fence that I went to the guru himself. I went and asked Sean. This is one where I think I should accept, and I don't want to accept. And he's like, I'd probably do that deal. And I thought, yeah, that's okay. Let's go ahead and do it. I might get his thoughts on OT next week as to would he still do it. But that was Addison, Skattebo, Higgins, and Chase Brown. In total, were traded for 4 second-round picks and 2 first-round picks. Sorry. And I still feel very much on the fence about it. But it gives you a lot of firepower as we move forward. But then the thing is you're in the draft. If you draft players coming out, is it a case? Do you draft you draft Cam Skattebo in this league here? I drafted him at the 203. Now, if I say I turned that in now to a first and a second round pick, is that of significant value? Is that worth doing, or is he somebody who becomes like just a fantasy scoring juggernaut like we think that he could? And is that a case where it isn't worth those picks anyway? Basically, you draft somebody in the second round hoping they turn into this. But again, we have a very small sample. It's very good, but you have to have the humility that maybe you like this player coming in. You may be double counting it now. Is it the smart move to move off him? And I think in this case, to diversify a little bit and to not think you're always completely right and to build those trade relationships, I think it makes sense. The team I also traded with are right, but they are also a little bit top heavy. Now, I've given them 2 more assets to make them less top heavy, but they're a team that I could see things clicking in the right direction and they win the league. And then you have to say, well, I have the 112 and the 212, and that's not what you want this to turn into. But I could also see a situation where this team ends up finishing 7th or, gets into the playoffs, but ends up finishing 6th in the playoff standings, or, how it works out. So you could see it being the 105 or the 106. There's a big difference in that in the 112. And that's the other thing during the season with the picks, the values can change tremendously. And then when we get to draft time, is the 106, at a tier break? Is it after the tier break? Are you happy with the player you get there? But they're all the things that you have to factor in as well. The other part is that my team is likely, with these moves that I've made and with how the league is trajecting, I'm probably going to be in the 101 to 103. So you have that little bit of a fallback based on your team's not going to be as strong. And that's in this league. Like if it was the FFPC, you'd be looking to win the back draw. So it'd be a little bit different of a nuanced conversation as to moving these names. But that was kind of my decision making into those trades. And I think it's one of those where like these are players who ideally I wouldn't want to trade away. The one I was most comfortable about moving was Chase Brown. But T. Higgins, like I think the T. Higgins, Jordan Addison, Cam Skattebo are generally players you want to be acquiring rather than moving. But it's just a different side saying, like a lot of times we like to talk about, oh, this team's doing great. So I'm, looking to move my first to get this player to make the push to win the championship. It's good to talk about the opposite side where this team just hasn't worked out. We talk about arriving early. This team has not arrived at all. Arriving early with the rookies, getting ready to go. This was a team that could have done that with some of the veterans, but it didn't. Some of the rookies, like an RJ Harvey, didn't turn up, obviously. James Conner gets injured. We're looking then at how to manipulate it to your advantage as we move forward. So let me know your thoughts on those particular trades and if you have any other kind of decisions that you're thinking of. I did mention a week or so ago, maybe it was even on the Tuesday waiver wire show, talking about I'll be going on vacation over the Halloween time, but I still want to put some shows out. So if you have any ideas for kind of evergreen topics, suggestions that would still fit in, that won't be week specific in terms of start sets or injuries or waiver wires, let me know. I'll be trying to record them over the next week or so to put them out while I am away. But shows like this where there's maybe like I'm talking through trades and more strategy elements as we move forward. Hopefully I'm getting a lot of good feedback, which I'm very grateful for, because when I started doing the solo shows, I was wondering, how will these be received? Will people enjoy them? But lots of positive feedback, so I do appreciate that. And if you want to drop a written review on your favorite podcast app or player, I'd also appreciate that. So we are going to finish it up there. One note I forgot, I just see it here in front of me when I was going through the Bengals game. Jamar Chase, we know Jamar Chase is going to be a legendary Hall of Fame style player. He joins and these are two pretty good wide receivers and Jerry Rice and Randy Moss as the only 3 players in NFL history with 6,000 or more receiving yards, 50 or more receiving touchdowns in their first 5 seasons. So incredible numbers there for Jamar Chase as he continues to be an absolute superstar. So finishing up there, and until we are back, have a good one.